Today we'll be focusing on the 8th book of the chapter 8 of the book of Daniel. And we'll be focusing on the second vision of Daniel. So it is Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 to 14 for us to truly understand the background information of this time. So let's read it together. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. And I looked in the vision, and it came about while I was looking that I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the... Then I lifted my gaze and looked, and behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. But he did as he pleased and magnified himself. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. And it came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. And I saw him coming beside the ram, and he was enraged at him, and he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns. And the ram had no strength to withstand him, so he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the beautiful land. And it grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnifies itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling true to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard the Holy One speaking, and another Holy One said to that particular one who was speaking, "How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled?" And he said to me, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, and the holy place will be properly restored." Amen. So it continues on in chapter 8, but we just read from Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 to 13 to see what the vision was about. And so he saw this second vision. There was a ram. There was this goat, and there was even 2,300 evenings and mornings. So let's look at the background of Daniel chapter 8. Well, let's first look from chapter 1. Chapter 2, 3, okay, well, 3, 4. Chapter 1 is when Daniel was taken to exile to Babylon. That's 605 BC. And we assume he's about 17 years old. Chapter 2, 603 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he couldn't remember his dream. And I had a dream. Someone needs to tell me what the dream was and its interpretation. And by the grace of God, Daniel interpreted it. Not only that, he told the king what he dreamed, and this was when he was 19 years old. And it was a vision about the golden statue. The head is the gold. Then it's silver, which is the arms, and the stomach is like bronze and iron and on. Now chapter 3. 586 BC. That was when the Israelites, there was a third exile. There was a third invasion from Babylon, and the nation was destroyed completely. And then after it was destroyed, so that was the driving force. The destruction of Jerusalem was the driving force. And so now Nebuchadnezzar sets up a statue, and everyone is supposed to bow down to the statue. If you bow down, you live. If you do not bow down, you are thrown into the furnace, a fiery furnace. And so who survived? Daniel's 3 friends were thrown into the furnace for not bowing down to an idol. But they survived and came out. So this is when he was 36 years old, Daniel. The 4th chapter is when Nebuchadnezzar became arrogant. And he became like a beast. And that's 569 BC. And Daniel was 53 years old. So from chapter 2 to 3 was 17 years past. 3 to 4 is 17 years past. And now chapter 5, you skip a while. It's 539 BC. Belshazzar. This is like near the end of that dynasty of Nebuchadnezzar. This is like the end of the Babylonian, when it was in power. There was a feast, like a party, and then a finger appeared, and mene shekel, and then so basically I've judged you, and there's this finger of God that appeared, and that was when Daniel was 83 years old, and he interprets what that is. The 6th chapter is 538 BC. Daniel is 84 years old. He's thrown into the lion's den, and he survives that. Now, chapter 7 actually happens prior to that, in 552 BC. Daniel is 70 years old. And then today's chapter 8. It happened in 550 BC, and Daniel is 72 years old for chapter 8. Because in Daniel chapter 8 verse 1, it says that after the first vision, he had a second vision on the 3rd year of King Belshazzar. And so the reign of Belshazzar is from 553 BC to 539 BC. 553 is when he began a co-regency with his father Nabonidus. So this is a co-regency. So then you have to consider 552 to be the first year of his reign. So 552 is, if that's his first year of his reign, then the 3rd year of his reign is 550 BC. Because 552 is the first year, 551 is the second year, 551 is the second year, 550 is the 3rd year. So 550 BC, that's when Daniel is 72 years old. In the Redemptive History Series, book number 5, on page 263, it says, Daniel received the vision of the ram and the male goat during the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar in 550 BC, 13 years prior to the first return from exile. So he's 72 years at that time. When Daniel saw the vision, his outer self, body, was in the citadel of Susa, but his inner self, the soul, was at the bank of the Ulai River. So the body and the soul was not at the same place. That's normal to be at the same place, right? But here, during this vision, it was separated. Daniel 8:2. And I looked in the vision, and it came about while I was looking that I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai canal. So his body was in the citadel of Susa, but I was beside the Ulai canal. So let's look at the map. It's the Mediterranean Sea. That's the Euphrates River, Tigris River. Babylon is right there, Babylon, the white circle. But with today's Susa, citadel of Susa is here in the red, right? With the white circle around it. Right now, this is still Babylonian Empire time period. The center is Babylon, right? That's the capital city. Capital city is Babylon, so you think that's the more important place, right? That's the central. That's Babylon. However, in chapter 8, it happens in here, Susa. Elam is here. So Persia, when it takes over, then Susa actually becomes the center, the capital city then. That's the central place during Persia. So in the Persian Empire, and then the Greek Empire. So he saw all of what was going to happen 200 years prior. But he did not see it in the central location of Babylon, but in Susa, where it's going to be the next important capital city for the next empire, Persia. Like, he saw that because he was in Susa. So his body was at Susa. And it shows what's going to happen in the future. What nation? What's going to happen to the nation? It's basically showing you what's going to happen to that location that you are in. He went to the Ulai River. So basically how it's going to take over. A different nation or kingdom is going to take over. Ulai. As we know, civilizations develop around the river. Because of the Ulai River, it's showing that the history is going to change. Like, who is in power is going to change. So the vision of Daniel chapter 8 expands and explains in greater detail part of the dream and vision that appeared in Daniel chapter 7. So Daniel 7 was also talking about the future, but Daniel chapter 8 expands and explains in greater detail that dream. So Daniel 7, it talked about, remember Daniel 7 is basically a similar vision to Daniel chapter 2. So like it's another dream of a similar, remember like Daniel 2, where head is gold, silver is the top body, then the bronze, then iron, right? As you go down the statue's body, it changes the material. But then here, it's in the shape of, there's a form of lion, bear, jaguar, and then the very scary beast. So Daniel 2 is the statue, the parts of the statue, and then the beasts. The 4 beasts is Daniel chapter 7. And then what happens in Daniel chapter 8? Then it focuses on, it talks about only about the bear and the jaguar in more detail. It explains those 2 beasts more closely in Daniel chapter 8. So Daniel 7 and 8 is very closely related. But Daniel 8 gives greater detail. Not the overall detail of everything, but just that bear and jaguar. So Daniel chapter 8. It's talking about Mede. Well, it talks about the lion, the bear, the leopard, sorry, not jaguar, but the leopard and the beast with 10 horns. So the bear and the leopard. But then Daniel chapter 8 says the ram and the male goat. It says a different animal name, right? So the bear is expanded and explained in detail as the ram. And the leopard is expanded and explained in detail as the male goat. So the bear is the ram, leopard is the male goat. But the ram represents Mede or Mede, and Persia. And so remember in Daniel 2, we talked about the kingdom that represents the gold, kingdom that represents the silver, then the bronze and the iron, right? So here, the ram represents Mede and Persia, while the male goat represents Greece. Right? So this is what it represents. Which kingdom? So Daniel 8, 7 and 8. It talks about Mede, Persia, Greece, and then it talks about then the Roman Empire, right? But then here, so Daniel 8, 20 to 21. The ram which you saw with the 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. So the ram has 2 horns. Media and Persia. Verse 21. And the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So he tells you in great detail and explains it. So when he saw this future, that he is in which kingdom? He is under which governance? He is under the Babylonian kingdom. So this is before Media and Persia comes to invade Babylon, before that takeover, right? So this is, he's already seeing the future of the rise and fall of the kingdoms. So of the 2 horns of the ram, the longer horn signifies that Persia would become greater than Media and conquer it. Daniel 8:3. Then I lifted my gaze and looked, and behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. So there's 2 horns. They're both long, but they're not the same length. There is the longer horn coming up last. That's Persia. The longer horn is the Persia, because it became greater than Media and conquered it. So the 2 horns symbolize Media and Persia. So they're both long horns, but one is especially long. That means that Persia is stronger than Media. Large horn between the eyes of the male goat refers to Alexander the Great of Greece. Because remember, the male goat had this large horn. Daniel 8:5. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. So he was coming from the west. And Greece is in the west. Daniel 8:21. And the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So the Greek Empire in the perspective of Babylon, in the perspective of Persia, Greece is from the west. And so this large horn is the first king, and that's Alexander the Great. So the first king of the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, who reigns from 336 to 323. Even though it's very short, he basically conquered the whole world at that time. Right? He's not even 40 years old. He's only 32, but he died young. And such a young age, he died. Third, the breaking of the great horn, because it is because he died so young, it was broke. And there's the emergence of 4 prominent horns, signify that the empire was divided into 4 parts after Alexander. Daniel 8:8. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Who are these 4 little horns? After the death of Alexander, there was no greater leader. It's broken into 4 pieces: Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander. Ptolemy, he was in Egypt. Seleucus is Syria. Lysimachus, Turkey. Cassander, Greece. So this is the 4 parts. Ptolemy, here in Egypt. Seleucus, here more in the Asia area. Here, that's Lysimachus is over there. That's like the Turkey area, and then Cassander, Greece. So big number 2. Let's look at the characteristics of the male goat that closely resembles Satan. Reverend Abraham Park stated, so there was the ram and then the male goat. The male goat is more cruel than the ram. And what's the characteristics of this male goat? It closely resembles Satan, it says. And he says 10 characteristics. So I'm just going to go by what he said. So how does it resemble Satan? The male goat that roamed over the whole earth without touching the ground. Daniel 8:5. I will read. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. So he didn't touch the ground. That means he's rushing so fast. He's basically traveling all over the whole earth. It reflects the nature of Satan, who roams over the whole earth and accuses God's people. They accuse God's people as they roam over the whole earth, and that's the characteristic of Satan. Job 1:7. The Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." He's not just visiting and touring, no. He's roaming. How can I make that person fall and stumble? How can I accuse that person? That's why he's roaming all the earth to do that. Revelations 12 verse 10, heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them before our God day and night." That is the characteristic of Satan, the accuser. So this male goat has that characteristic of accuser. Second, the male goat charging at the ram with furious power. Daniel 8:6. He came up to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. So anger, which is a characteristic of Satan, does not accomplish the righteousness of God. So anger does not fulfill God. Right? Ephesians 4:26-27. Be angry and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. So as we live in this sinful world, yes, it would be great not to be angry. Even if we do angry, even if there's a moment for that, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Because to be angry James 1:20 says, "For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God." But Satan makes you keep on being angry. So he keeps making you be angry to bring you to ruin. So the third male goat, enraged even more, strikes the ram and breaks its 2 horns. Daniel 8:7. "And I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him. And he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns. And so it says, so at the end time, Satan rages and seeks to destroy the saints like a roaring lion. We saw it this morning in 1 Peter 5:8. "Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." 4, the male goat knocks the ram to the ground and tramples it underfoot. Daniel 8:7. "So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him." So in the final 3.5 years, Satan will cause the saints to stumble and will trample the church. So this is the latter 3.5 years. Satan will make the saints stumble and trample the church. And this is a foreshadowing of that. Revelations 13:5-6. "And there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and the authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven." Then the male goat, whose single horn is broken and divided into 4 horns. Daniel 8:8. "Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 contiguous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven." So one big shatters, and now there's 4 little ones. So it reveals the nature of Satan, who fractures and divides the church. So he fractures and divides. So Jude 1:18-19, let's read. "But they were saying to you, in the last time there shall be mockers, following after their own ungodly lusts. These are the ones who cause divisions, worldly minded, devoid of the Spirit." So what will happen at the end? In the end, last time? There should be mockers, following after their own ungodly lusts. Right? They cause divisions. And that's what Satan wants. He likes divisions. He likes there to be fractures. 6, from among the 4 horns, a little horn emerges from one of them on the male goat. In Daniel 8:9, "And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn." So the male goat. There was one large horn, then that gets broken, and there's 4 small horns. But out of that, there is a small horn out of one of them. So it's broken into 4. The broken horn, the large horn is broken into 4 horns. And then out of the 4, there's the one horn that, out of one of them, there's a small horn again. So the dragon will give authority to the Antichrist, the beast. Revelations 13 verse 4 says the dragon will give authority to the Antichrist, the beast. And they worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? You may say, why is God staying still? There's such a wicked person right there. How come he's not punished? But the more last time it is, there is a time God gives us authority to the beast for a certain amount of time. And so they worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? 7th, the little horn grows towards the glorious land. Daniel 8 verse 9, and out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. And so the little horn is going to the glorious land. It's basically invading. It's kind of going into. So it signifies that in the last days, Satan will attack the glorious Jerusalem. So Revelations 21 verses 10 to 11. It says that he showed me the holy city Jerusalem and coming down out of the heaven from God. Right? Now verse 8. The little horn that cast down some of the stars to the ground. Daniel 8:10. Some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. That's what the little horn does. It signifies that in the last days, 1/3 of the Lord's servants will fall away. They will fall away. It signifies, so Revelations 12 verse 4, and his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Is it talking about the numerous stars? 1/3 of that disappearing and coming. Is that what that really means? No, just like the stars in the sky, the spiritual leaders, they will fall. They will fall to the ground. It's talking about the fall of man again. Oh, I truly respect that person over there. I looked up to him, but when I look carefully, he has all these corruptions. Like it's being revealed, like all of the corruptions this person committed. Like this. And so 1/3 will fall. So Revelations 1:20 and Revelations 12:12. Now the 9th. The little horn that abolishes the daily sacrifice and defiles the sanctuary for 2,300 evenings and mornings. So this came from that male goat. Daniel 8:11. It even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host. And it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. Daniel 8:14, and he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, and the holy place will be properly restored. That means that during that duration, the temple will be defiled. 30. It declares that in the last days, the sanctuary will be trampled for 42 months. So it says in the latter part, leave out the court which is outside the temple, do not measure it, have been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Revelation 13:15, it says, so there was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, right? Now 10th, the little horn, the one king, who arrogantly opposes God and is destroyed. So it will be destroyed, this little horn. Daniel 8:23. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. (8:25) of Daniel, and through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. And so he made God's people suffer and be tormented, right? He will deceive them, magnify himself in the heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. So it signifies the devil, the Satan, who will ultimately be thrown into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. So in Revelations 19 verse 20, the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake fire of burning sulfur. Revelations 20:10, the devil who was deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone. So conclusion, no matter how strong the horn may appear, there were so many horns, right? There was a ram with horns, and then there was a male goat with horns. Then the horn, it gets broken. There's another smaller horns that appear, and out of that horn, one other horn appear, right? So no matter how strong the horn may appear, in the end, it will be pierced and destroyed by that very horn. I did everything. It was my work, right? It says that they magnify themselves, right? But in the end, it will be pierced and destroyed by that very horn, and that is the word of God. And so Psalm 7:15, he has dug a pit and hollowed it out, and has fallen into the hole which he has made. So even though you're boasting all about your horn, eventually you will fall. And that was the male goat. That's the work of the male goat, and that's the work of Satan. So let us fall sway to the temptations of Satan. In Daniel, it says that 2,300 nights and days, there's a duration. It's not forever. And so truly, let us overcome it all. Let us endure through the days of transfiguration, and be with the God of glory. I bless in the name of the Lord.